But for tonight, we were going to do an Ask an Expert segment. So we have a lot of in our own society that have grown for a number of years.
Like this.
And I thought we would pick their brains about any questions that you guys might have. And so we did have 4 questions submitted, actually 3 submitted to the form. So to start off, I thought we could go through those and then you guys could ask more questions. But the first one is Jan noted that they're having trouble with their dahlia leaves being.
Yeah, it should be on mute.
Oh, okay. So their leaves are being eaten and they think that maybe it's slugs, and was curious to know if you guys had any suggestions.
Does she have any pictures?
She did not send any pictures.
How big are the holes in the leaves?
Jan did not say either. So maybe we could talk about things that eat dahlias and approach it that way. So if it's slugs, there is the same treatment for slugs and earwigs, but Tony, do you have thoughts on that?
Earwigs.
Yeah. I was going to say, the earwig holes are generally smaller and the slug holes are bigger, but you can have baby slugs that make small holes. So I think it's pretty hard to definitively look at a hole and say if it was a earwig or a slug. Problem with those is if the hole is in a small leaf, as the leaf grows, the hole gets bigger and it looks worse. I kind of think personally, I'd like to hear what the other experts say about this. I think that those leaves, once they're got holes in them from slugs, almost are damaging to the plant. I strip those off. I hate looking at them for one thing, but I actually think they set the plant back a little bit. I don't know if the slugs have something in there when they're digesting those that poisons the plant or what, but it's just an observation I've made. It seems like the plants do better if I strip the slug-eaten leaves off. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I agree, Tony.
So they leave that trail on them. Look at that.
It's okay, Randy.
It's not.
I don't usually strip leaves, I guess, although my plants are still very small, and so I hesitate to take a leaf off that's such a large part of the whole plant. But I sure have had slug problems. I've had slugs in the dry weather eating the shoots off down in the mulch, and at least I'm assuming it's slugs. I did see one in the process of doing that, but I really can't say that was the case for all of them. But I bet I had a dozen plants that were eaten off down in the leaves that I have on the top of the beds. And that really surprised me. That really irritated me, I should say. Because some of the plants will no doubt survive that, but I think some of them may well not, because they were eaten right off. I always use the slug bait. I guess the natural one is iron phosphate, I believe. Is that right?
Yes.
And that's the one that I typically use. Although I'm not, I'm not particularly pleased with how well it didn't work because I put it on when I first planted. And even before the shoots started coming through, so.
Isn't the old fashioned treatment cups of beer?
Yeah. Yeah, although I haven't done that recently, yeah.
But they're more sophisticated today. They would prefer wine.
Probably so, Mark.
And I would say if you're looking for the difference between slugs and earwigs, look for the slimy trails. That would be a pretty good indication that it's slugs.
Yeah.
I use Deadline, which I'm sure that fractures some of the ears here, but and I've seen around almost every plant dead slugs. So they're there.
What is it called, Randy?
Deadline.
Deadline.
Deadline, yeah. It's a blue, and you sprinkle around the plants, but works great, but obviously it's not organic. So.
And a dead slug is the only good slug.
Deadline actually used to come in a liquid. I don't know if it is. That was Gene Woznicki's favorite slug tool, and used to come in a liquid in like a squirt bottle, and used to just ring every plant with it. And that's why they called it Deadline, because they did not cross that line without dying. But I think it's metaldehyde, isn't it, Randy? It isn't organic.
I haven't looked at it. Yeah, it probably is a metaldehyde base.
It is.
It is?
Is that 2 words or one, please?
One.
One.
One word.
One of the other ways to control the slugs is early morning or late evening. Take a spray bottle with ammonia in it, and that's kind of fun. Kind of fun. Boy, that's a telling sign, I guess. It almost dissolves them. It's really kind of satisfying to see them disappear.
So wait, you spray ammonia on the slugs?
Yep.
Ew, gross.
I'm even more ruthless. I actually take a sharp pair of scissors with a real point, and I go and I cut them in half. And I think the most effective way to control slugs when you have a big problem is to go out every night with a headlamp and just pick them, just cut them in half, or spray them with ammonia or whatever. But I mean, I don't think there's anything more effective when you really have a lot of them, just going out every night after dark and just killing them. They're really hard. And if you do leaves like I did for decades, leaves are just, even in my soil, like when I compost, I get slug eggs in my compost that'll sometimes hatch out when I mix up my own potting soil. And so I'll have cuttings sometimes and I'll see little teeny holes in them. And if I look hard enough, I'll usually find that little teeny baby slug that's hatched out. But they're a real problem.
I collect them in a foam cup, and then I throw them into the pond and feed my fish.
Oh.
That's
It's a
recycling.
win-win.
That's making good use of them.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So our new goal is everybody collect your slugs, and then we'll all go to Nancy's house.
They're a great fish bait. I used to use them when I used to take the kids fishing, just collect them, and the fish can't stay away from them.
Mhm.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some good options there for Jan. The second question is, when is it too late to plant to get flowers?
God, I hope it's not now, because I'm still planting.
I think, and I got this from Rudy Bredenbeck, who was one of the best growers I ever knew. And he was in our society, and Rudy always says, Tone, you can plant up to the 4th of July and get blooms in the fall. So I know this was probably back decades, but I think that's still pretty true. I don't think it's too late to plant now, even to drop a tuber, not even close, Now it's varieties are different. Some varieties are early and some are late, but generally speaking, I think there's still a couple real good weeks. You can replace plants that are virused or just don't look good. And if you have some extra tubers, just drop them.
What about for tuber production? For tuber production?
Yeah.
I
That should be all right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pulling seedlings out now that I started from little teeny seeds the middle of March, and I've got clumps of tubers on those things, and this is the middle of June, so it doesn't take.
But are
very
they
long.
viable? Will they have
Oh,
a grow?
yeah.
I mean, okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. When you dig in the fall, even if you plant in early July, you'll have viable tubers on that clump.
Okay.
That's another reason to do it, just so you can you get more tubers.
Yeah, I was wondering. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, right.
Well, we put in a new field this year. So we've already put in about 2,000 of them. But
Wow.
it was so much work, and our field wasn't ready, and our tractors broke, and how the story goes. And so I still have stuff sitting all over my patio going, well, I mean, I'm putting it in because it's either throw it away or put it in. But I don't know how productive it'll be.
I think Rudy used to even plant according to the particular cultivar in order for it to be first blooms at showtime. And he was, most interested in showing and was a great exhibitor. And I think he used to plant according to that. And sometimes it would be late June before he even chose to plant.
So he would figure out the time to maturity on the bloom and then the next year plant backwards from that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, he grew this, you'll find that with a lot of your people who are really focused on exhibition, that they know how long it takes. Certain varieties mature faster than others, and they grow the same varieties so regularly because they do well and they know how they grow well in their gardens, that they can use timing like that. For a lot of people who are just growing a lot of different varieties, like 2,000, you'd need quite a spreadsheet to track all that. But
I have a killer spreadsheet. I have the spreadsheet of all spreadsheets. I told my sister, I go, don't mess with my spreadsheet. My entire brain is in that spreadsheet. She's like, your entire brain? I was like, yeah.
Jennifer, we're going to need to compare spreadsheets because I thought my spreadsheet.
Oh, yeah.
I wish I had a spreadsheet.
It's invaluable.
Yeah.
I just have the spread.
Yeah.
Can I comment? Can I comment?
Yeah.
Well, I want to, I'm of course new to Ohio and the soils and so forth here. And the city of Lakeside head gardener cooperated with me and they ripped out all the shrubs and lilies that were in the front area, about 8 feet in diameter, right in front of the house. And thanks to, they brought in topsoil and I mixed in peat moss into it and tilled it all in with a rototiller. And thanks to you guys, I picked up 15 dahlias at the tuber sale. And those are up nice and high. It'd be about that high now, 6 to 8 inches high. I had to part, you'll have to part because I don't know all your types here yet. But in the pots, I had a colorette bloom and it was just gorgeous. It was almost a very dark red colorette with a beautiful yellow center and the lovely 8 petals. Also, I want to thank some people I said, I'm looking for any spare tubers you might have. Well, I wound up with 60 spare tubers, and I now have 75 plants in the ground. All those tubers that you guys thought may or may not grow, the only 3 that didn't grow. They've all gone in potting soil, pots, and I've started them up. And I'm just anxious to see what it's going to look like. But it's also a plot for everyone that walks around in the evenings and then in the morning, you exercise, they walk right past it. And people thought at first it was tomato plants. And I said, no, it's not tomato plants. And so I'm expecting my first bloom later this week. It'll be a BB, and I think it's a decorative. But again, I don't know the right terms to use here yet. But I'm really excited about what may come up because they're really looking nice. And in this front yard, the 8-foot circle around has of course, fire hydrant in it. So if I ever need water, no problem. But I also planted around the edge and in the center, and I made a walking path through it. So when people can come in and walk through the dahlia beds. So I'm really promoting them here. Most people have never seen them here.
And for those who don't know, Dwight just moved to Ohio from Australia. So he's kind of learning all about our Ohio climate.
I am. I had to leave behind my 185 tubers, or plants, I should say, that were growing. The guys in the club, I couldn't bring them because of quarantine rules. And the guys in the Dahlia Society of Victoria, where I was president, came to my house and dug them all up, and they got a nice profit at the sale.
Dwight,
Mhm.
did you grow clivia in Australia?
I'm sorry, is that a variety or a type?
Clivia are those tropical plants. It's not a dahlia.
Oh,
Those wide green foliage plants with the beautiful umbels of orange or yellow flowers in wintertime.
yeah. Well, they're growing out in a pot in the front porch here.
You brought it with you.
No, I picked them from Costco.
Got him from Costco.
Okay.
They had pots of lilies and clivia, and so I put them in there, and they're just done great. I have a wonderful clivia vine climbing up the stop sign in front of the house. After 3 years, it's doing great.
On a little side note, the best clivia, if you're familiar with that plant, you probably have one that has orange flowers in the wintertime. The best clivia in the world all come from Australia, and it's a really popular plant, and there's plant societies all over, and they've got clivias now that bloom red, yellow, apricot, green. They come in all different shades, but they're expensive. They want hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a little piece of a plant. So, but we digress, sorry.
Well, no, it's a good point, because see, if you bring anything in, you got to go through quarantine. Quarantine means pay the government to grow them for a year. And they look at them and say, yes, they're okay, now you can have them, but you pay the cost of the government growing them for you. And then you get them. That's why it's so expensive. One of my favorite dahlias is Como. And I thought you see it in the pots here.
And since we're talking about first blooms, I thought I'd share my first bloom. It's already up. And we'll see if anybody recognizes it.
Wow.
Does this look familiar to anyone?
Yes.
It's a Baron Ron.
Is it? I'll be darned.
What type would you call that?
Ron, I forget the.
Stellar.
It's a stellar.
Stellar, yeah. Okay. Same name we use.
Yeah, so first all you have,
Funny.
Nice then.
Yeah.
Next meeting, I'll have some pictures to show you. So many of you guys will remember some of the names of things you created.
Baron Ron wasn't that a Daryl Hart winner for you, Ron?
No, oh, no.
I think you're just being, I thought that won a medal. He's good to check, see?
He's looking for the ribbons on the wall.
Research.
It's an
Baron
outstanding.
Ron, you're right, Tony.
he didn't even remember. Tony remembered.
I remember he won a medal with that. That's a beautiful dahlia.
Thank you.
I have a box of cloth ribbons. And Alice said, where are you gonna put those? I said, I don't know, but somewhere.
All right, so our next question comes from Sharon. Let me read it. Sharon says, I always thought new roots came around the crown, but this year we have many tubers with roots at the other end of the tuber. Will these nourish and hydrate the plant?
Both.
Yes.
They make,
Yes.
you're just not sure. When I pot tubers up, sometimes if I see roots around the crown, I plant them upside down. I've had success. You just got to watch so you don't overwater them.
So why would you plant it upside down? Are you just mean like you plant horizontal and then you turn it upside down?
I usually plant it at a 45-degree angle, something like that. Corner of pot to corner of pot. And most people will put the tail end of the tuber down. And if I see, especially if I got a sprout that's going vertical along the lines of the tuber, I'll turn it upside down. And then that sprout will work its way up through your pot from pretty good depth. I've had a lot of success. I've been doing Bob Moynihan's really, he's the one that really set that on. And so that's the way I've been doing it for, I suppose 6, 7, 8 years. Not all of them, but if they warranted, I'd do that.
Well, I plant them horizontally, as just said, and I plant 2 to a stake. So I don't have as much work to do because I got 2 coming up right beside each other. Maybe they may be the same variety or they may not be the same variety, but everyone has a label on it.
That's a really interesting topic to bring up, because Dick Parshall just wrote an article that was in the Bulletin a few issues ago, and he talked about how he often didn't sell the little ugly tubers, and he would plant them actually vertically, with the eye end up. And I think that's, when you think about it, when you divide in the fall, that mother tuber is always in the way. And especially for people who try to save that. Now, I get around that because I stopped saving the mother tuber, which is the original tuber you planted, and I always throw it away. So I always cut it off so the clumps are easier to divide. But if you plant, that's because it was planted horizontally. But if you plant vertically, I'll just bet that you could cut that off a lot easier, and it would be easier to divide too. I've never planted vertically because my soil is a little heavier, and I was always afraid that would encourage rot at the tail end of that. So I've always planted up just 2 or 3 inches deep, rather than people with sandy soil probably plant. Well, Randy, how deep do you plant with your sandy soil?
4 inches.
Yeah, see, I don't plant that deep. You could probably get away with smaller tubers by planting vertically then, or upside down.
But the advantage of the horizontal planting is the plant has more time to gather the nutrients that you may put on top of the soil.
I have had good success when I planted vertically, and you get a wonderful round cluster of tubers at the top. But I haven't done a lot of it. When I have an opportunity with a little tuber, I do it because I think it works very well.
Another thing that I've seen online this year a lot, and I don't know that it's true, but people are saying that the roots that form closer to the crown are the ones that develop the tubers, and the roots that are at the tail end of the tuber don't develop anything. Is that true?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I agree with that. But they still nourish the plant. In answer to Sharon's question, roots come out from the tail, and those are the ones that we usually see when we're traying up or potting up our tubers in the spring. The first thing you'll see usually is roots from the tail, although Randy says sometimes they'll put out roots from the crown. And I've noticed myself that if I get roots from the crown on a tuber, I'll cut that root off with the cutting when I'm taking cuttings, and those things will root within a week because they've already got a root started. So they really take off. But they do form, the tubers that we dig in the fall are formed from the neck of that tuber around the crown, although roots do come off the tail that don't form tubers in my experience. I don't know if anybody has had other experiences with that.
Well, so in that case, we probably wouldn't want to cut off the end of a tuber. I always thought it was okay to cut off the end of a tuber.
Tubers come off the end.
Well, I can tell you just two schools of thought. There was a fellow in our society who was from England. His name was Dick Howells, and he was a member into his 90s, and he was a consummate dahlia grower. And one of the things that Dick said is that you never, ever take the tail off a tuber. I mean, if it was a foot long, you just wrapped it up and left it, because he says that's where the roots are going to start when you want to start that thing in the fall. And that's true. Problem is storing those things can be a real hassle. And then the other school of thought was Buddy Dean at Hillside Dahlias, Hillside Gardens down in the Carolina. And Buddy was just, as good as an exhibitor as there was in the country. Buddy used to take those tubers, especially anything that was very big, and he would just leave a 3-inch piece. He'd always cut them off. He said, I don't want that big tuber in the ground. The plant has a tendency to live off all that tuber, and instead of forming the roots from the crown where you want them for tuber formation. So there's two schools of thought on that I've been taught over my dahlia career, and you can pick which one you think works best for you.
Well, I found I've had both. Most of the cutting in half comes from my misplacing the spade in the soil.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question for you guys. I'm now starting to get buds coming on. In Australia, I'm used to the process called disbudding. And so I'll have 3 buds coming on the top, and I take 2 away, and then I come down to the next level of leaves, and I take off that bud too. So I'm only operating coming up with a single bud. And that's how I usually get my good tubers. I mean, good flowers. What do you guys do?
Yeah, we always remove the side bed at the top. We remove your side buds. And what I do is I remove what I need to down to create a show flower.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And I don't show, well, I do show, but I'm not as hardcore as Tony and Randy and those guys. But if you're doing cut flowers, if you just bud that as well, you're going to get a longer stem, which is better if you're selling to like florist or even like your own bouquet making. So
I find with the just bedding too, I get better tubers on the ones that I'm at, just really on top of just bedding. My tuber clumps are massive.
I wish I could say that, Jennifer. I do not have that same log, so I'm guessing you're.
Well, there's never, because I don't show, so there's never a flower that ever even gets to think about going to seed. Like nothing even gets to consider possibly becoming a seed. Those flowers are gone. And then all the side buds are gone. The only energy that it's only going to be spending energy on the flowers that I want to cut for stems and to go to tuber production.
And how far down do you take the two side buds off, and then do you take the next set of laterals off too on all your, or do you go down even further?
It depends on the plant, because some just have naturally long stems. But if they don't have the natural long stems, then I start whacking at it. They get nothing for you. Everything goes until you give me long stems, and they eventually comply.
Yeah, I do the same. I cut pretty deep, and I learned the hard way at Ron's house. He does not do that. So I went a little further than Ron would have wanted me to go. So yeah, I cut super deep on mine too.
But I need them for vases. So, I mean, I regularly need them for vases ongoing throughout the season. So I have to cut deep. But I get so many flowers. You get to the point where you can hardly keep up with them.
Well, I tell you, I'm the grower, and Alice, my wife, is the arranger. And so she was arranging all the time. And we used to get so many blooms, like you say, and I would put a bucket outside the front gate and saying, free dahlias, take what you want. Leave the bucket behind, please, but take all the blooms you want. I got some of the nicest letters and notes from neighbors and people far away that would come by to see and grab some dahlias out of the bucket.
Good for you.
Ron does the same thing if you go by Ron's house.
Yeah. It is a nice thing to be able to do, yeah.
To share, you're sharing.
Okay.
Do you ever, let me ask the cut flower, I have heard that if you want long stems, you're better off with a side bud than you are with the center bud. Is that true?
I don't particularly do that on purpose. I have done it if, bugs got the center one before I could get to it. Jennifer, do you do it?
I don't. I usually give because I'm focused on that center one that started. And so the side ones, lots of times will shoot up taller if I haven't been paying attention, but I always cut them.
Yeah.
But I don't, if you have the right variety, it already has long stems or has a tendency long stems, and you're doing all the things, long stems really isn't a problem.
Ron,
but I do find that those side buds aren't as good as that first bud.
That's correct.
I'll experiment this year, Ron. I'll do some because I have a bunch of plants that they're the exact same variety. I'll see if I can't just work on the side buds on one and see what I
say.
Yeah.
Cool.
Pretty well documented over the decades. That's a trick that exhibitors have used for genetically short-stemmed varieties where they're a little crotchy, that they'll select a side bud. I don't know if Randy does that with like Brinter Fall, or do you use center buds on Brinter Fall, Randy?
Yeah, I use center buds. I just think, if you use a side bud net and that's exposed, it's just a distraction.
It leaves a fault for sure.
Yeah.
So I have a question about fertilization. So what are you guys doing at this moment to fertilize? Are you using stuff with a lot of nitrogen in it? And if so, when do you kind of cut that off? Randy, I want you to tell me your secrets.
No, I'm a firm believer that I start out slow with, and don't get anything too hot because you got your, your little fine hair roots and, if you get out there and spank them with urea, you're gonna have a tendency to burn them roots. I just, that tuber really is not doing the job because it's just a tuber until you get your root systems. And I try to bring the nitrogen along a little bit slower after I get some decent root development.
What about for cuttings? Because we just planted in this new field and the ground is total crap and there was just not a whole lot we could do about it this year. So the ground is not great and I'm noticing some, just some yellowing and they just look like they just need some nitrogen and a lot of them are cuttings. They're not tubers. So would you hesitate to add nitrogen, fertilize with a little more nitrogen in it?
Well, if you feel you got roots on them, I would, but I would try to do it, lightly. Whether if you're using a granular or whatever, go to.
What about? We tend to avoid the horse manure, but I'm tempted to put a little horse manure on there. Would that be a horrible idea?
Well,
Had to be very well composted.
Right.
It's composted. It's last year's manure, but I just never did. But then again, I've never had ground this fresh and this not so great.
I know someone is selling rabbit manure. Is that any good?
Well, I'm back to wait just a second, to answer that last question. I think the safest thing to do in your situation, since they're cuttings, would be maybe to get some blood meal or feather meal, which is really slow released and probably won't hurt them at all. And try that. And what you could do,
But we're talking, keep in mind, we're talking 2,000. We're talking several rows, lots and lots and lots and lots.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a lot.
You can buy blood meal in 50-pound things,
Okay.
just a handful and just broadcast it about as easy as you can broadcast a granular. So I mean, that would be probably the safest option, I would think. But you certainly could, take some, do some with horse manure and some with blood meal, or feather
That's
meal.
true.
Ron likes alfalfa pellets for nitrogen, I think. And
What about with the animals? I don't really want to attract any more groundhogs or bunnies or that I.
well, blood
don't
meal is a
need.
natural repellent. They use it to repel rabbits and stuff. I mean,
Okay.
that's an old time remedy. So I don't think you'll have trouble that way, with blood meal.
Okay.
You could experiment a little bit and find out what works best for you, because any answers you're getting from me tonight are not chiseled in stone. They're just stuff that I do and has worked for me in my situation. And by no means, is going to be good for everybody.
Well,
No,
remember,
it's a great idea though. Thanks.
remember, each of us has unique soils. So no one will have the same soil.
Right.
Jennifer, I don't have great soil either, although it's getting better, but my cuttings also looked like they needed nutrients. And I just have a backpack sprayer that I've been doing like a foliar feed of like fish fertilizer that I got down in Amish country. And I've been doing that once a week and they've completely kind of perked up over the past 3 weeks.
Oh, that's good to know because I've never planted so many cuttings before, and they do seem like they are, they do seem like they're like kind of need some feed.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I get the Amish version of Neptune's Harvest. So they also sell like gallons of it down there in Fredericksburg.
Say the name, Jennifer, again.
Neptune's Harvest is what I get the Amish version of it, but it's just fish fertilizer. Like I think it's like a 3-2 something, 322 maybe, or.
So when you think about it, when a little sprout is coming from a tuber, the tuber is filled with nutrients from last year. and tuber sprouts are always going to be greener until they're not. If your soil is lacking in fertility, eventually that tuber will be spent and your growth will yellow a little bit. Cutting grown plants are on a brand new fibrous root system. So there's no storage of nutrients. So they require nutrients immediately as they're growing or when they're placed into the soil outside. So if your soil is nutritious and ready to receive a dahlia, your cutting grown plants will immediately absorb those nutrients and they'll be green and they'll grow quickly. If your soil is starved, whether you're doing it organically or with synthetic fertilizers, if your soil is starved, your cutting tubers will be starved and they will go yellow, not yellow, but they will go off green fairly quickly. So you need to have your soil fertility ready to receive the dahlias, or you need to know what type of fertilizers you're going to apply around the dahlias once you have them planted. And if you've missed the boat and if they're yellow and you don't already have nutrients in the soil, I believe in all these organic solutions, but I also think there's nothing wrong with the Peters 20-20-20 and watering in a yellow or an off green dahlia cutting that's growing, and it'll green up in a week.
Someone mentioned
if you can't do that with 2,000 plants, then you might consider some granular applications of something. I mean, Rob, you're on, and you gave, this, is this backwards or this, are you reading that right side?
Right side.
That vigor.
Yeah.
This liquid that I understand people are beginning to purchase. This is a 926. It's fish and it's kelp. That I would think that would, I've never used that vigor, but I would think that would react fairly quickly. But I'm one to carry a 2-gallon water bucket with a fertilizer of some sort. I have only 100. So I'm one to carry a 2-gallon water bucket and give my plants whatever I think they need.
No, that makes sense.
Someone said the meal, I think you said feather meal?
Feather nitrogen, yes.
Well,
Blood meal, feather meal, alfalfa pellets, those are organic sources of nitrogen.
It's spelled like the word, like feather, like a bird feather?
That's what it's from, like feathers of birds, my understanding. Yep.
From chicken processing.
Right.
And if you're looking for like large bags of alfalfa pellets, good old Yoder's Produce has them. That's where I get them from.
I'm used to, in Australia, there were some unique products available. And one of them resulted in a sticky solution on the plant and especially on the stem. Therefore, slugs and aphids couldn't climb up. They just stuck to it and killed them.
They were using a product down there that I can't remember the name. I tried and they can't get it in the States, but the top inhibitors in Australia were using something, I don't know if it was called micro something, and it was just, they were just having tremendous results with it, but can't get it in the United States.
Correct. The product I used was called sea salt. And it was a very sticky solution and so many of the insects, but still things like, praying mantises didn't stop them. They helped clean up my bed.
So as we're kind of chatting about bugs, I thought it would be helpful to kind of talk about what you guys are using to control pests. I've already seen aphids out there in the garden.
The one you want to watch out for are the little leaf hoppers. because they're the ones that transmit virus. And they're out. If you, during the dry spell, if you started to water, if you splash the water over on top of your little plants coming up, you'll notice the little leaf hoppers all flit up from the foliage. So they're already out and active. So you may want to do something.
Brennan Hall when this long word comes of riches in an idiom. Ben, what is it? Correct. All of it.
Somebody watching.
Well, how are you treating them right now? Because I've noticed that clearly the leaves are showing, some of them are showing some signs that there's some bug or something. And I have seen some aphids, but you get kind of the crinkle leaves that kind of curl to it where it kind of bubbles. Is that from leaf hoppers?
Can be.
No, it's audible. Oh, hurry. You're still in the lead. You're at 4,600. Go ahead and sell up again. Oh,
Is somebody watching Jeopardy?
This 8-letter word means an overabundance.
Sounds like it.
So are you spraying? Are you spraying? Or what are you guys putting on them to deter the bugs?
I use in early. Yeah, someone's got a TV going.
Yes, his brother was excellent. So groups 1,200, please. Perhaps a candidate for a name.
Got it. Okay.
So there's a lot of different controls, organic controls for insects, or chemical controls. So it just depends on who you are and what you would choose to do or not choose to do. I tend to be a little more aggressive early in a plant's life cycle, so the plant has a chance to get ahead of any potential insects, and so that there's no chemicals, organic or synthetic, that are anywhere near bloom time or contained within the plant tissues anywhere near bloom time. So there are, for me, speaking for me, I like the synthetic pyrethrums, and those are quick release, quick knockdown. If you focus just on a small plant, my plants are small. They're I've got 2 or 3 sets of leaves. They're 3 inches high, 5 inches high, 8 inches high, that range of size. I'm amazed you guys have flower buds. I'm still trying to figure that one out. But my plants are small, and so I will hit them once or twice while they're still small, to try to target some of those early pests. But I don't do that long, and I don't do that anywhere near when the plants get much larger or near flowering.
And Mark, what kind of brand name would those products be? Like
There's a lot of them. There's a pyrethrum. There's a bifenthrin, which is a synthetic, and the common name is Talstar. There's I can't think of the other very common garden pyrethrin that's available, but they're all in that class of knockdown and not necessarily long term. It's not things like neonicotinoids, things that have months of residual, which are quite nice, but we have to balance. We're growing flowers. You don't want to grow flowers and then poison them. That's a very dirty trick. So it's a balance between success and do no harm.
Mark, how often are you spraying with these?
Not often at all. Right now, the leaf hoppers first become active, and I want to catch them now for this first 3 to 4 week period at most, and then I'll be done, and I'll let life play out the way it plays out. But if I don't catch it, they'll be all over the place, And if I've got 100 dahlias and one has virus, and of course one has virus, probably half of mine have virus. That's a tough thing to get around virus. But if a handful have virus and the others don't, and you have leafhoppers going from plant to plant to plant, you're exposed. So it's a real challenge.
Mark, I need to disagree with the leafhoppers. I don't know the source of your information on the virus, but
You're on thrips.
Thrips.
Yeah.
Are thrips leafhoppers?
No.
No, okay.
But thrips too.
Yeah, RNA viruses tend to have thrips as the vector, and DNA viruses like this darn new DMV are spread by aphids. And that's, I'm just quoting Professor Papu, and I've never heard him say leafhoppers are a virus issue.
And
anyhow.
I understand that. I follow all that incredible work. And yes, you guys have pointed out aphids and thrips and those synthetic pyrethrums. I should have included those. Those synthetic pyrethrums will easily take care of those two pests.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
I was going to say with leaf hoppers, Mark's exactly right. You water and in fact, that's the hard thing when you spray those. As soon as the spray touches the plant, those leaf hoppers scatter. I mean, they're incredibly adapted to survive, but to check for them, you can just walk out and you can just bump the plant, just tap it. And if you see a bunch of little bugs kind of flip out, they're so small, especially the kind that I used to see when I was in the Cleveland area, and I'm seeing them down here now in the Columbus area too. And I sprayed this morning for the first time because somebody pointed out when you see the crinkled, bubbly leaves, you've probably got some insects going on, even if you can't see them. I use that JMS stylet oil, but I think Monterey also makes a garden spray. But these are very refined mineral oils, and they're a quick knockdown with a very little residual. And the problem with leaf hoppers, though, is their life cycle at this time of year is so quick. You end up really, if you get, I used to get them really, they were my worst pest in my garden for decades, and mainly a June pest and just into July, and then they seem to really tone down. But you should probably spray those every 4th day with the oil. Spinosad doesn't really have too much effect on them, I don't think. But I use the JMS. I was out there this morning. Even the little ones that were coming out of the ground that were like 3 inches tall, I could see some of the leaves were bubbling and curled a little bit. And those leaf hoppers, they're not really discriminatory as to how big the plant is. They'll just jump on there. So I use the highly refined mineral oil, which is organic. And at this time of year, if I've got a hopper problem, I'm going to be out there probably every 4th day hitting them with the oil at 1 ounce per gallon. And you can't spray if it's over 85, and never spray in the sun because the oil is like a magnifying glass. It'll burn the plants. So the safest thing to do is always spray after the sun is off your dahlias in the evening. As long as it's dry by the next morning, you're good to go, even if the temperature goes up. But I've talked about that for a long time, but then Jess has told me she's had some burn problems with the JMS, which I've never seen it at 1 ounce per gallon. The label I think says 1 to 3 ounces.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You
usually don't have to use, if you use 3 ounces, I can see you getting into trouble. But I've never had trouble at 1 ounce per gallon.
I will say, like, my husband was the one doing the spraying, so take that as you may. But this week he's out of town, so I was in charge of the spraying, and I actually read the backpack sprayer wrong. I thought it said 15 gallons, and it was 15 liters. So a lot of oil went in, and a lot of Captain Jack's dead bug went in. Like I used the JMS and Captain Jack's at the same time. but nothing burned because it was so overcast and it, rained off and on. So thankfully, I don't have to hear about it when it gets back home about how I messed up.
Would we be able to send? Oh, I'm sorry. Would we be able to send, like, maybe send Jess what product you're using? Because I would love to see what, just read a list of what everybody's using. Because as I write it down, I don't know that I'm spelling it correctly or whatever. And it would be nice. I would love to see kind of some products and how people are using them.
Yeah.
Maybe just a handful, and then I could go look for them to try something different I hadn't used before.
Yeah, and I know what Tony uses because I use it. But Mark, if you could send me yours, that would be helpful.
Okay.
And I just want to circle back on the leafhopper virus thing, Ron, because leafhoppers do transmit virus. Are you saying that the virus that's in dahlias is different than those that are in like wheat or vegetables?
Jess, I know well what Papu says about dahlias, and he says very specifically thrips for the RNA viruses and aphids for the DNA viruses are the vectors. Now, I don't want to say that leafhoppers can't transmit virus in dahlias. I mean, because a pair of cutters can transfer virus, but that's a huge piece of damage. And so my impression is that those two pests are the key transmitters of virus in dahlias.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And thrip, the three insects that do most of the transmission are leafhoppers, thrips, and aphids. And the different species and different viruses have different hosts that carry it or don't carry it. So it's just so in my mind about leafhoppers carrying diseases. I was just generically speaking leafhoppers. But you'll notice we don't have beautiful multicolor impatiens anymore. Remember the hundreds of flats of impatiens you used to be able to buy at all the local garden stores every spring? They're not around anymore. It was the #1 selling spring annual, and now it's virtually zero. It's been replaced with New Guinea impatiens. It's because there's that impatiens necrotic ring spot virus, and that wiped out all the impatiens literally in the United States. I'm exaggerating, but it just decimated that industry, and that's spread by a thrip, and so it's tough. These viruses are tough things.
Excuse me.
But the thrip are everywhere. It's hard to protect yourself from thrips and insects. That's why resistant plants resistant to viruses is such a dream of so many breeders.
I was going to say too, with the leafhoppers, on that same topic that Mark just touched on, I've noticed over the years that certain varieties of dahlias are much more susceptible to leafhopper. In my own garden, I can see that some plants and some varieties just seem to get hit really hard with them. They're almost like sentinel plants in a way. And there's a thing called hopper burn that you can see on dahlias, and they see it on potatoes. But when leafhoppers get so bad, they really can almost mimic virus. I had some pictures. I know Ron and I did a presentation one time on virus way back in the early stages, and I had some plants in my garden that were hopper burned. And they yellow and they look really unthrifty. And the tendency is to say that it's virus, but hoppers are a real problem at this time of year for a lot of us in Ohio.
That's interesting that you say that, Tony, because on Facebook right now, it honestly makes me not want to get on Facebook. But everybody's like showing pictures of dahlias and what they think is virus, and like any sign of like any kind of vein clearing or any kind of yellow leaf, Like people are just chucking their dahlias.
Oh, it drives me crazy. Absolutely crazy. I mean, the minute it's like WebMD for dahlias. The minute you see something, do I have cancer? Yes, in 10 days to die. You know,
Yes.
everybody's like, they're pitching and then they're mad and they're like, why do growers sell this to me? And I'm thinking, well, growers probably are treating their flowers with all kinds of, you know, good stuff and they never even saw a problem and you don't have a problem in the first place. Or you probably do have a problem, but that's not your problem. But I mean, you probably do have a virus because a lot of them do. But the fact of the matter is, it looks like you just need to feed it. And then they're pitching stuff and they're all mad. And I had to turn it off too. I had to turn it off.
So I'll just,
Ron can tell you about the veining and the difference. I mean, when the yellowing is between the veins as opposed to in the veins, you know, that's one thing that is like 101. Ron, you want to speak to that real quick?
Well, the key virus symptom is the chlorosis of the veins. And although that's typical for most, the tomato spotted wilt virus has a ring spot issue. And we've also seen the oak leaf pattern that is a possibility, but the key one, the one that I perceive to be reasonably reasonable that I can with some confidence say it has virus is the vein chlorosis along the veins, not between them.
And insects aside, we're still sterilizing the tools, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And Randy maybe can even give, you know, since this is like you guys are seeing this on Facebook, but Randy has sent out that link to North Carolina, the nutritional deficiencies too, at this time of year, just like Mark reiterated so eloquently about the tuber feed and the one and the cuttings needing to, you know, any kind of soil deficiency is going to be shown. But there's some beautiful pictures they did on dahlias in North Carolina with nutritional deficiencies. I don't know if Randy can get that link to Jess so people could look at that, because that's a great resource.
Do you have it, Jess?
Do I have that link? I don't know that I do. I think I've seen it in the past.
I'm pretty sure it's on the ADS Value University. I'll check while we're talking, but I think it's out there.
I can also find it if you don't see it, Karen. It's an excellent analysis, an excellent summary of the of nutritional effects on the appearance of the foliage of dahlias. And it's comprehensive. It's really a nice job. And I got the guy's it's based on a thesis. The fascinating thing is that there isn't a picture in the thesis. That's all, the only useful information is in this YouTube video that's by the young man's professor.
You know, Randy sent out pictures. I've got pictures on my phone that I have as an archive in my email. Yeah. Is Randy still on the call?
Yeah, I can look for that and try to send it out. It was actually the video. Me and another person, we kind of pulled the photos out of that video, and that's where that came from. So you're getting black market material here now. But it was made by a I can't remember, it was a professor, so yes. But North Carolina State. Yep. And it was on YouTube. You could pull it up, you know, under nutritional dahlias and nutritional deficiencies. But if
it'll come right up, it'll come right up in a search.
Yeah. So
so as the war is waged against virus, and of course I support everything that's being done to that end, a temporary ongoing solution for all of us is to feed your dahlias. And for me, I would say heavily. Dahlias are feeders. They are heavy feeders.
Yeah.
And to a marked degree, a well-fed dahlia will tolerate virus better than a starved dahlia. At some point, the virus particles will get so great that it will truly be an anchor and totally affect the plant. But if it's an early infection, or if the plant is marginally dealing with the virus, a well cared for, well watered, good nutrition dahlia will tolerate the virus better than not. So follow all the virus protocols, but care for your plants well at the same time to try to override some of the effects of virus in the meantime.
Well said, Mark. Well said.
Well said, yeah.
Yep.
For those of you that are interested, that's the I'm showing you a picture of the garden in front of our home with the fire hydrant in it and the street sign. Half the garden belongs to the city, half belongs to me. But the city has agreed that I can rip it up so that that bed has been completely stripped and fresh topsoil brought in. So next time we have a meeting, I'll have some pictures of the dahlias. There are 60 dahlias, many of which are yours, in that plot. Matter of fact, many of all of them are yours.
Good. Nice.
I have a nutrition question, and it's back to the dreaded, dangerous, quote unquote urea. For those of you that maybe have applied some granular urea to their dahlias, and let's say the dahlias are right now, they're in the ground, they're growing, they're up a couple of inches, and you might want to add some urea. If you're in that camp, for those that have done it or are doing it, how much urea do you sprinkle lightly around, let's say, one dahlia plant and its neighboring stake?
There was an article in the ADS bulletin recently where or did I read it online? Maybe it was one of Jess's links. They did the writer did a test, and he did a tablespoon around the plant. I read another article that called for a half a teaspoon. So the other day, I needed a little boost, and I fell into the urea, and I put in a teaspoon around, and the plants are up a foot. So there's a good root system. I needed something quick, and I used a teaspoon. So I don't know if it's worked. I've read a tablespoon, I've read a half a teaspoon.
And that is sprinkled in, let's say, about a 2-foot square area, maybe 20 inches all direction from the little sprout.
It calls for along the drip line. So surrounding the widest part of the leaves, you would sprinkle it.
But the drip line of a little plant coming up is different than the drip line come July. So you probably went out a foot to 15 inches all direction.
Yes, probably not quite that much. I probably should have, but I didn't.
Okay.
Some people are dissolving it in water, but I don't know what concentration, and they're watering the root zone. I back decades ago when I, used to mess with urea a little bit. It's hydrophilic, which means it draws water. So if you take a granule of urea and put it on top of your soil, it'll get a water ring around it. I just myself, and I think this goes back to what Randy was alluding to, that you put those chemical nitrogens on these plants that have surface roots, and it's sucking water out of the soil. I don't know what it's doing to those hair roots that are around there. I don't know much more about urea than that. I know some people were mixing it in water and thought it was safer that way, and I could see why, because it's not going to draw water from the hair root tips, at least theoretically.
Yeah, I guess
Well,
it's
you
an
know-
experiment and I'm going away for a week. And when I come back, if they're all dead, I'll know I did the wrong thing.
Yeah, they'd be dead by now, probably.
So the reason urea is the poster child for synthetic fertilizers and as bad as you can get in terms of possible issues is urea is 4600. So if you have 100-pound bag of urea, 46% of it is 46 pounds is pure nitrogen. If you buy a bag of 5-10-10 and you have 100 pounds of it, only 5 pounds of that out of the 100 is nitrogen. So urea is the absolute pure form of a urea nitrogen. So it's very strong. So when you put a little bit down, you're putting multiple times more than you would be putting down if you were working with a regular 5-10-10 or 12-12-12 fertilizer. And then so if it's too strong, it absolutely will burn the roots. And then, you know, we get into these discussions, we all really should work away from synthetic fertilizers. And I'm trying on a number of things, because I'll tell you something that will really get you thinking about that. All you have to do is take a natural soil that's got its own biological community and fertilize it one time with a synthetic fertilizer, and you will permanently change that soil for years, if not decades, even if you never do it again. So it has a powerful effect. So if our farmers that have been farming the same land for generations, we have high mineral soils and there's a lot of nutrition in them, and they simply need to keep adding nitrogen, and that's the only way we'll get our corn and our wheat to feed the populations. But that soil is so very different from what soil is in the surrounding woods around those farms where it hasn't been touched. So urea is very strong, simply because it's 46% urea. It's almost half pure powerful nitrogen. So it's very easy to burn. If people are used to grabbing a little handful of some type of granular fertilizer like a 10-10-10, and they do the same thing with a little handful of urea, you're 4 or 5 times more concentrated right out of the gate just by reaching for the same handful. So it's very easy for someone to get into trouble. So you are talking a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon at most sprinkled around a plant, but that puts you in the synthetic camp. And if you don't want to be in the synthetic camp, if you want to be in the organic camp, you don't put urea down. Or you put it down very limited garden areas. You know, if you just want one tiny garden where you're going to work on certain plants, you can fertilize one area and you don't do it anywhere else on your yard.
Can we revisit the thing about the rabbit manure? I just picked up several bags from the Cuyahoga Fair guy. Can I sprinkle that around each of my dahlias? Is that like too much, or should I do it in the fall?
In my opinion, see, I'm a mixed gardener. For most of my gardens, we have 4 acres. For most of our gardens, we do not rototill, and we do a lot of organics.
Right.
But for my lily collection and for my dahlia collection in those particular beds, I am more aggressive, and so I'll do the other sin. I will rototill. And so in my opinion, when I'm adding organic fertilizers and nutrients, I like to rototill that into the soil, and then I will plant my dahlias into it. But that brings us to a whole different discussion of rototilling. Do you remember a pest exterminator company in Cleveland called Ridall? RIDALL. Does that ring a bell with anybody? There is a nonprofit organization in downtown Cleveland and it's named after that founder's company. It's called Ridall. And it is an inner city farm, and they do everything with organics and composting. There's not a synthetic fertilizer that finds its way to that property. And you should see the Swiss chard and kale and tomatoes and cabbages. It looks like Alaska in terms of how big these things are. So organic is beautiful, but it takes many years to get to that point. But it's a very, very noble goal.
Okay, but so I still didn't get my question answered, but can
Take your
put it on my
pellets out.
plant? Should I wait till fall and rototill it in?
No, don't wait. The faster you can get nutrients on the ground, the better. So read the label and apply it as they say, and get it down on the ground around your plants. And if you can scratch it into the surface, that's great, because they work better. They'll dissolve and they'll start the chemical proposition, the chemical response of breaking down into nutrients quicker if the particles are down in the soil a little bit and staying moist. If they're laying on the surface and
Yeah.
baking dry, they're just going to lay there for weeks and months and not do much. But just
Okay.
get it on the ground according to the directions sooner than
Okay.
later.
Well, there's no directions. We got it from the rabbit guy.
Yeah.
So
How old is it?
there's just, I got 5 bags of rabbit manure. So like I just picked it up today and I'm kind of trying to figure out how to put it
How
down.
old is it though, Nancy? How old is the manure? Like when if you
There's
put your
the-
hand in the bag, can you still see the little rabbit pellets, or does it just look like nice black stuff with worms in it?
It's nice black stuff. I haven't opened it up yet, but he said it's a year's worth. So it's not new. He's been
Oh.
saving it for a year because Dave Cap used to get it all from him. And this is like
Yeah,
stuff
Dave-
that Dave.
But when it
Dave-
really,
Dave-
but when it really smells, I picked up some too, and believe me, I had all my windows down on the way home.
Stinks.
I'm not putting that on my garden right now. I'm gonna put it in my compost pile or in my manure pile, and I'm gonna cover it with a tarp and wait till fall. Because it can't smell that strong and be okay to put down on the garden, I don't think. He
I
says,
agree
it
with
is,
that.
but I don't think so.
One of
Okay.
the YouTubes that I recently saw, and I'm sorry, it's somebody that was talking about Neptune's, thank you, Neptune's harvest. Anyhow, he felt that rabbit manure was one of the ones you could put directly on the garden green, fresh.
Right. I heard that
So,
it's,
you know, I don't know, I have no idea how, how accurate that statement is. It's one of those things from YouTube, but his argument I found very reasonable and rational. But I was a little surprised at using any green manure, but he said that rabbit was one that you could literally, take it
Yeah.
from the rabbit pen and put it on the garden.
I think
yeah,
that's
that's what I read too, that it's not hot and it just, you can use it anytime, but it does smell pretty bad.
I think it's a 2-1-1, right? So it's pretty
Oh,
low.
okay. Well, maybe I'll put some on some and none on the other and do an experiment myself.
I think that's always an excellent idea. I've done that with a number of,
The neighbors you want to keep away.
The what?
Put near the neighbors you want to keep away.
I have cows for neighbors, so my cows for neighbors, so it doesn't stink like cows do.
So can I add something else? Since we're talking about nutrition, I think it's a brilliant idea to have a soil test done of your garden so that you know where you stand with the major nutrients, and the pH of your soil, and you also know two of the minor nutrients that are very important: calcium and magnesium. Now, most of us, if we keep putting leaf compost down and organics down on a regular basis, your calcium and magnesium are off the charts. It's generally not harmful, but sometimes they're completely off the charts because those two minerals are held in organic materials, and it's released into the soil when you add a lot of organics. But sometimes people are missing calcium and magnesium, and that makes a huge difference if that balance is off. So a soil test, it's probably a little late this year, but I would factor that into your planning next fall or next winter, so you know where you stand. You don't go to the doctor and they just start throwing medications at you. They take all sorts of tests and then they decide what you need. You have to do the same thing with your soil. You got to know where your soil is in order to know what to add, whatever, organically or synthetically. So I would pay attention to that. So the other thing is, people are talking. Can you read this? Does anybody buy kelp meal? This is really, really good stuff. Kelp is a natural plant, as you well know, from the sea, and kelp gives us a different profile that's beneficial to plants than things like manures or fish. Fish is a living animal, and it has a series of nutrients that are valuable for plants, but kelp has vitamins and enzymes and minerals that are extremely valuable to plant growth. And there's a number of different products that have kelp, and that this vigor that I showed you earlier, which I've not used yet. This is a mixture of fish emulsion and kelp, so it's pulling the best of both worlds. So I'm going to try that this year for the first time, and I know Rob is going to work on that. But I would Google kelp meal and read about it. It's remarkable for all your different plants that you're growing. If you have other tropical plants, whatever, and it comes in all different. It comes in all different forms. Here's one called Maxi Crop liquid seaweed. Many different products have kelp. I would Google it and read about it and see if that doesn't interest you. You'll see the difference when you
get it, Mark?
What's that?
Where do you get it?
Everywhere. The cannabis growers have discovered kelp. So any of the garden stores that sell all of these jungle juices and all these interesting nutrients, that's all designed for the cannabis growers. But it works great for us tropical plant growers, or Amazon. All these different fertilizers are found on Amazon. But I always try to buy from our local garden stores first, because I don't want them to go away. I am sad at the thought that we'll only have Amazon someday. So I like to buy locally when I can.
And if you're in Cleveland, there's a place called Indoor Gardens. It's in, I don't know, it's like 20 minutes from my house. I forget the area, but I'll put it in the email, the follow-up email. And they supply a lot of, well, I'm assuming cannabis growers, even though it's illegal in Ohio, because the whole place is kind of decked out specific to that crop. And so I know for sure that they have it there along with every fertilizer you could dream of.
So I'll just share something with you. Cannabis growers start out the first 40% of the life high nitrogen, and then they switch to higher phosphorus and potassium. So does that sound familiar? So the cannabis products, if you can find organics, which a lot of them are organics, drives down the same road that the dahlia does.
Mark, what pH are we looking for? 0?
I'm sorry?
What pH do we desire? 0? Balance?
So neutral is 7, and I have a very interesting chart that shows which nutrients are most available to plants at different pH levels, and it's generally 6.5 to 6.8 is the range that for many plants the most amount of nutrients are available to them, but that differs greatly. There are plants that take up minerals when it's more acidic, and plants that only take up nutrients and minerals when it's more basic. But I'm very comfortable when my soils are 6.5 to 6.8, somewhere in that. I like the high sixes.
That's what we used in Australia.
If you're 7, that's fine. If you're 7.2, you're going to grow beautiful things. It's a wide range. But if you're more than 7.2 or 7.3, you're pretty sweet. And if you're below 6.4 or 6.3, you're starting to get a little acidic, which depending on what you're growing, the plant may not like it. It's all chemistry. And I don't know about you, but it raises what's left on the hair at the back of my neck. I never did well with chemistry, but it's all soil science is a very difficult course and major to take, because it's all chemistry. And you all know that a certain too much of one thing affects how something else is taken up. It's very complicated. And then that's assuming we know what's really going on, which, you know, there's so much in nature we don't really understand how it's working. So it's very complicated. So you aim for the mid-range and you're very likely to get everything right. Just try to stay away from the extremes.
Thank you.
That chart, by the way, too, is in, for those of you who have John Menzel's book from Australia, that chart that you're referring to is in there about the effect of mineral nutrient uptake by pH. You know, the thing that remember too, and I think it's more important, what Mark touched on before, for a lot of the way that our farmers are growing on these non-organic soils and using a lot of chemical fertilizer, I think pH is probably a lot more critical than for, and this is just my own theory, but for the organic gardeners, where you're creating a huge organic buffer. And I think you can stray a little bit further without getting into as much trouble because of the big organic buffer that you've created with great soil. You know, so if you feed your soil, you feed your plants, everybody's happy.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, when you walk out onto a farmer's field that's been growing corn for generations, they refer to it as dead soil, and it is. It's just dirt. And so it's dirt with whatever nutrients the farmer puts down, and they put down exactly what their particular crop needs. So you're right, and it can go wrong very quickly because it does not have that incredible web of life buffer, biological buffer that the natural soil has.
Okay, other.
You're right. And I used to visit John Menzel every now and then, but he was very particular about his soils. By the way, if any of you have a winky kernel, I'll buy it from you.
I don't know that anybody does have that here.
John told me one time that his soil was 8.2 and he grew really great dahlias. I don't know if that could possibly be true.
No.
But his soil was highly alkaline out there in the desert. Its soil was actually red, but he did use a lot of organic techniques. And he grew great dahlias. I saw him personally.
He had a huge area where he got his dahlias started in beds, raised beds. And then he did a lot of rototilling. Matter of fact, Ann did a lot of rototilling for him.
Tess, I was going to ask about kale and clay. I bought some from our favorite down south Amish country person, and I haven't put any on yet. I'm wondering, are people putting kale and clay on, and is it helping with insect control? I'm curious about who all uses it.
I did last year. There's a reason I'm not using it this year, and that's because I planted anemones and ranunculus in my raised beds before I put my dahlias in. And so if I were to spray now, those are blooming. So I've not used it this year. Tony, are you using it?
You know, I got the idea to use it from John Menzel when he talked about how he grew plants in the desert, and he talked about the key cornerstone was pulse watering, and then he called it sunscreen for dahlias, and it was kale and clay, and it turns the leaves white, but it doesn't seem to affect photosynthesis. By turning the leaves a lighter color, it reflects more light, and they say the leaf temperature then is 10 to 15, 12 degrees cooler because of that. So if you get these real high temperatures, it helps. I was curious too if it was going to be an insect deterrent, and I believe just anecdotally when I used it in my seedling garden, which was in the middle, I mean, sun up to sundown, not a tree within, 200 yards either way. So I was curious, and I think it really did deter a lot of the insects, not completely, but I think it was a deterrent. I accidentally one time mixed up the two bags, and I used diatomaceous earth instead of the kale. I sprayed that on, and it worked just as well. So I don't know. And I think I even contacted the company to ask them, but of course they didn't want to comment on that. But the big drawback you got to stop spraying it if you're going to any thoughts of exhibiting or even for cut flowers, because the stuff, once it's on, it does not wash off. I mean, you can take a toothbrush and you can't get it off. It's on for good. The rain washes some of it off, but you can see the residue. It really kind of leaves a mess. So I used to stop spraying. I think I used to spray regularly through June, and then I'd stop in July. But that was my hopper season, and I thought it really helped with the hoppers. The hoppers didn't seem to like the kale and clay.
I will say it does not stop spider mites.
No.
So Tammy knows, she's in there with me. If you had spider mites, it will not stop those guys.
That mineral, that highly refined mineral oil that Tony was telling us about, and the brand that he uses, Monterey, I use that same brand. I really like it. That kills virtually every insect because it suffocates it. But remember, you have to get complete coverage. And what caught my attention is your thought about mites. It works very well for mites, but you can't just stand up with a little spray and aim down at the ground and squirt the top of your foliage, because all the mites will be underneath. So you have to get underneath the leaves, and that gets harder and harder exponentially depending on how many plants you're growing.
To my husband's credit, even when he burned the crap out of them last year, it also took care of all the spider mites. So when Tony came over with his magnifying glass and looked, we could see little dead bodies. So it definitely does work with spider mites.
It does suffocate them. I use the JMS stylet oil out of the stylet oil only because that's what I started using, and I feel really comfortable with it. But you're right. You have to get the underside of the leaves, and the spider mites that most of us experience start on the bottom leaves and work their way up. And it does get incredibly difficult when the plants get big to get good coverage on the undersides. And spider mites life cycle, a lot like the leaf hoppers, are very, very quick. So you're out there again every 3-4 days, you got to be hitting them. And I would advise anybody who sees spider mite on one of their plants, just pull the plant out, put it in the garbage can, don't compost it, and just get rid of it. You want to call the plants that you see it first on, and then spray diligently everything, especially in the surrounding area, but your whole garden, because they fly, they blow in the wind and stuff. So they are really hard. Once they get established, it's really hard. That's why it's important to be able to recognize the early signs so you can get them. Once they're really bad, it's almost impossible to get them under control.
And I did not check my plants last year with the spider mites. I think Nick's nuking took care of everything, but yeah. Other questions you guys have? No? Okay. Well, for not having a speaker, I think this was a really good Q&A that we had this week or this month. So if everybody wants to send me links, I'll add that to the follow-up email along with this video and send that out to you guys probably tomorrow or Sunday, depending on my schedule.
And did you see the North Carolina link I sent you in
I
the
did.
chat?
Yep.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you all. It's been very helpful for me.
Okay.
Oops. I shouldn't have clicked Sharon's link. All right. So that's all we had for tonight. We'll kind of follow up. I'm sure we'll have things coming in July. The July speakers, Rich Gibson from 20th Avenue Dahlias, and he's going to talk about hybridizing. So if you're interested in learning more about hybridizing, and then in August, we'll have our picnic. And then show season starts. So I'll also probably send out the video of how to stage a bloom to everybody. I don't know that we'll do that workshop again this year, but we do have the video that Tony did last year. So I'll send that out before show season as well.
Just what date is the July meeting?
It's the third Friday of the month. Let me look at a calendar.
Not that I don't trust you.
I don't trust me. See, it should be the 21st of July.
Thank you.
And then the DSO picnic will be August 5th. And that'll be in person at Mobius in Aurora.
What do you call that?
It's Mobius Nature Center, right, Sharon?
Is
Yeah.
it picnic?
And it's a picnic, so people bring dishes and we all hang out and chat, and then Ron and Tony usually do their judging seminar at that same time.
Good.
Cool. All right. Well, I will let you guys go. Enjoy the rest of your Friday night. Thanks to everybody who shared some knowledge with us. I appreciate it. I'm sure everyone else did as well.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Jess.
Good night,
Bye, good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And Sharon,
Jess, are you still there?
Yep.
Can I show you my first cutting that's blooming now? Hold on.
sure.
I'm excited about it because we need some inspiration. Really good.
Oh, it looks great. Which one is that?
Oh, that's Rebecca Lynn.
Oh, yeah, I've grown that one before.
How do you guys have flowers now? I can't figure that out.
She was potted, I think, the 1st of April. It was a cutting, and she was potted the 1st of April, and then she spent some time in the hoop house.
So you
So
just
that's why.
let one terminal just keep growing and growing until it budded.
Yeah, she was just a little cutting. Cut it off the tuber and then rooted it. And I told Jess, because at first when I started, I'm like, nothing's taken, and then all of a sudden everything took. But yeah, and then as soon as she developed roots, I put her in a little pot and she just grew and grew, and then I put her over in the hoop house, and then she became a full-size plant. And she didn't go in the ground because I put her on my back patio for inspiration because everything else is not moving. So
Rock
it makes
and
me feel
roll.
better when I see something happening.
I'm a little different than Jennifer. I pot mine in March usually. And then I do pinch. So mine have kind of been,
I think this was pinched. This one was pinched.
so we
She
both,
just grew fast.
yeah. So we just start early, Mark, because we're crazy and our houses reflect our craziness.
My tubers are tightly wrapped in saran until 2 weeks before I want to plant them outside in the yard. I take them out 2 weeks in advance, warm them up, put them in flats, and in 2 weeks I get a nice little roots. I get a 2 to 3 inch little shoot, and I pick up the little baby and I just lay him down into the garden at the base of the stake.
Yeah.
Because I've got so many other plant hobbies going that I need the greenhouse for them. So when I unwrap these dahlia tubers and put them in black flats with soil, they go right out to the driveway.